This is TWiT.
I think today's episode is really talking with you, Émile, about I guess it's, if I had to think about this, it's about the for some anyways, for some of the big players in AI, partially the driving motivation about how they think about their technology and why they might believe that they are the right ones to be doing what they are doing in this moment. And Jeff, both here and This Week in Google, you have brought up many times the concept, the idea, what do we call it? The belief system of long-termism.
Faux philosophy, I tend to call it.
Faux philosophy, effective altruism. Yesterday, of course, throwing out TESCREAL. So these are all big concepts that I think it would be good to at least start off by getting a sense of what does this terminology actually mean? And you've done a lot of work in this regard, Émile. So I guess give us a sense of the work that you do around this terminology as a starting point.
Yeah, sure. I mean, maybe it's worth noting that I used to be in these communities.
That is very worth noting.
I was a believer in the long-termist worldview. Also, the communities, the overlap in the groups of individuals who are adherents of, subscribe to transhumanism and long-termism is pretty significant. So also, I was for a while sort of enamored with the transhumanist vision as well. And so, this term TESCREAL basically emerged from a collaboration I was working on with Dr. Timnit Gebru, a computer scientist who used to work for Google. And we were trying to understand this constellation of ideologies, techno-futuristic worldviews that are shaping and driving the current race to build artificial general intelligence, or AGI. And so, we kept referencing transhumanism, long-termism, effective altruism, rationalism, and so on, and talking about individuals who have been influential within these communities or these traditions of thought, which really date back about 3 decades, at least in their modern forms. And so we ended up with sentences like Nick Bostrom, a transhumanist who participated in the extropian movement, who's written about the singularity with some trepidation, but also a large dose of excitement, who also is connected to the cosmist worldview, hugely influential among rationalists and effective altruists, and a co-founder of long-termism. So those are just prefatory remarks in the sentence to get to what we wanted to actually say about Nick Bostrom. So the paper became completely unmanageable. And that's why I suggested, why don't we just use this acronym, whereby the first letters of all of these different ideologies are listed roughly in the same order that the ideologies themselves emerged historically. So that's one reason why the acronym is somewhat useful. And that enabled us to streamline the conversation quite a bit to make it actually manageable. So the paper, basically could be reduced from 20,000 words to about 8,000, without referencing all of these ideologies individually. And so, it's a bundle of, like I said before, techno-futuristic worldviews that overlap significantly in terms of their vision for the future, their approach to ethics, which tends to be very quantitative. Basically, they, a lot of people in the TESCREAL movement see ethics as more or less a branch of economics. And so, they're the economists of ethics, and just, quantifying, taking these numbers, putting them in an equation, crunching those numbers, and then using that to determine what the right and wrong course of action is. So anyways, this bundle, really, like the 3 major AI companies out there, OpenAI, DeepMind, and Anthropic, which have billions of dollars in funding. OpenAI obviously DeepMind was bought by Google back in 2013, 2014. OpenAI has, a huge amount of money from Microsoft, and then Amazon just gave Anthropic $4 billion, if I remember correctly. So if you look at the origins of these companies, they all go back directly to the TESCREAL movement. And so big tech, there's a sense in which big tech is not like other domains of where there's lots of money and really powerful companies like fossil fuel companies. What is, if you ask the question, what is motivating these fossil fuel companies to do what they're doing? It's profit. Like that is provides a comprehensive and complete explanatory picture of what's going on. With big tech, that's only half half of the picture. The other half of the explanation concerns the techno-utopian vision, which is at the very heart of the TESCREAL bundle. So I hope that's a useful, just sort of broad overview of these ideologies.
It is. I've learned so much from you, Émile, in this process. Do me a favor for the audience and just spell out TESCREAL, what each stands for, just for a second.
Sure. Yeah, it's TESCREAL. And so all of that stands for transhumanism, extropianism, singularitarianism, cosmism, rationalism, effective altruism, and long-termism. And so transhumanism is really the backbone of the TESCREAL bundle. And long-termism, if you don't mind the silly language, it's sort of the galaxy brain that sits atop, because it really binds together a lot of the major themes and the most important ideas of all of the previous ideologies.
So the thing that struck me in reading your backgrounders on this, and we'll share with the audience the links to your writing on this, is this idea that we owe the future more than the present, that there's 10 to the 58th possible future human beings, real or augmented, I guess you could say, and that these folks believe that they are in the position to serve that future better, thus they should be rich, thus they should populate this Earth and then other planets, thus they should stick things in their heads to make them better humans, and that there's a hint of utilitarianism about this, the idea that the greater good becomes the ethical justification for the things that I want to do, and eugenics at moments, because it's better people, and that gets real scary real fast. So that's kind of the structure that I've understood from you, and I'm grateful for that education. What I'd like to go to is the impact that has now on the technology that we're talking about. Yesterday on This Week in Google, the other podcast that Jason and I work on together, I quoted the Axios survey. I don't know if you saw that, of 200. You're going to love this. 200 academics in AI were surveyed by Axios and partners. And 58%, as I remember, found that AI CEOs are untrustworthy. And so what strikes me here is that we have a weird thing going on where the people who know about AI, Timnit Gebru being a god in that way, right? And stochastic parrots talking about the current and real and present tense issues that we need to deal with in this technology and understand better. And on the other hand, you have Elon Musk sitting with the Prime Minister of the UK, spitting his BS. You have people from Oxford, Nick Bostrom and William McCaskill, using that incredible platform to spew this kind of stuff. You have, as you pointed out, I think billions of dollars not only going to the companies, but to organizations that are pushing this stuff. They're getting programs into universities, classes into universities, fellowships into universities around these belief systems. But besides just being even worse than NFT boys and crypto boys, and just more obnoxious than them, which is part of it, there's a real impact to this philosophy in terms of what they're trying to build, what they think it empowers them to do, what they think governments should do to empower them in turn. So talk a bit, if you would, about how TESCREAL, and by the way, Mark Andreessen wrote his version recently, and that was about effective accelerationism, which I presume is also a cousin here. Mm-hmm. So it's all of this self-righteous belief that we can manage the future.
We are the ones.
And as a result, right? And then the other piece that comes out of it, obviously, is the doomsday side. Stop us before we destroy mankind, because we're so powerful, beating our chests. We're so amazing. We're so brilliant. Yes, we must be controlled, but let us write the controls. Let us go through regulatory capture and figure that out. Okay, so that's kind of my framing. Tell me if I got anything wrong there. But what I want to go to next is what impact all of this has on what they choose to make, on the way they present it to the world, on how people are, the anthropomorphism of all of this, for one thing, right? The use of words like hallucinating, how it's going to be presented to the public for use, and how it's presented to governments and their roles. What is this set of philosophies? What's the result of all that we're seeing in how AI and generative AI are rolling out?
Yeah, great questions. So everything you said was accurate. Maybe I would modify a few things,
please,
just a bit, and say there's more than a mere hint of utilitarianism within the TESCREAL movement. I mean, utilitarianism has been hugely influential. Even the leading effective altruists and long-termists and transhumanists are explicit about that. So the other thing I would say is the connection with eugenics, I think, is pretty significant. I mentioned TESCREAL. The TESCREAL movement goes back, basically 30 years to the late 1980s, early 1990s. But transhumanism, again, the backbone of this bundle of ideologies, that traces its genealogy back to the early 20th century. So, in the work of like Julian Huxley, J.B.S. Haldane, J.D. Bernal, there are a bunch of others, many of whom were very prominent and important eugenicists of this first wave eugenics movement. So Julian Huxley, for example, he's the guy who popularized the term transhumanism in the 1950s, 1960s. And, so after the atrocities of the Nazis during the 1930s, 1940s, even after that, eugenics persisted. So there's continuity across the 20th century with the eugenics movement, which a lot of people don't realize. And transhumanism is basically eugenics on steroids, at least with respect to its goal. Because the old eugenicists, they wanted to just perfect the human stock. So just create the best version of us. Right. And also to prevent humanity from degenerating, which is a big concern among many people. In fact, one of the theories of how racial groups evolved involved this notion of degeneration, that we all started as white people and then certain groups degenerated over time.
It's the opposite, folks, but yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's an atrocious legacy. And, a lot of the worst aspects of the 20th century eugenics movement, I think, are still kind of all over the place in the TESCREAL movement. But transhumanism itself, that is a version of eugenics. If you ask a philosopher, it's uncontroversial. That's just a kind of
that's eugenics. Really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I think, one of the ways that these ideologies and this movement has impacted the world is it goes back to what I was saying initially, which is that a complete explanatory picture of why these companies like OpenAI and DeepMind and so on are explicitly trying to build artificial general intelligence is because they see AGI as the shortest route from where we are right now to a techno-utopian world in which we completely re-engineer humanity, we colonize space, and ultimately we subjugate nature, we exploit the vast resources of the cosmos, which people in the TESCREAL movement refer to as our cosmic endowment of negentropy or negative entropy, usable energy. So yeah, this would be like
manifest destiny gone universal.
It really is. So actually, I would recommend to listeners a book that was published just recently called Astrotopia, which foregrounds this notion of manifest destiny and how, again, there are all of these movements and ideas of the past, which were really toxic and caused tremendous harm. And pretty much everybody acknowledges that now. And then there's this sense that, well, we've moved on. but we haven't. Eugenics is still alive and well in the TESCREAL movement. And this notion of manifest destiny that continues, the colonial mindset that persists as well in this notion that we need to go out, colonize space. And, people say, well, we're going to go to exoplanets where there aren't life forms. And so it's fundamentally different. Maybe there is life out there. And then the question is, like, honestly, if you have SpaceX or whatever the next generation is, run by a younger sociopath like Elon Musk, if there is life out there, do you think we're going to stop and go like, okay, let's not? No, of course, we're going to go out and do what, people in the West have been doing for hundreds of years. We're just going to go and destroy and exploit and extract and so on. So anyways, the whole reason that AGI is an explicit goal of these companies is because it is seen as the vehicle that is going to take us to techno-utopia. In fact, a lot of the people who are working on AGI, particularly over the past 2 decades, so people who've been there from the beginning, they would argue that it's not just about this sort of grand moral aim of maximizing value within the accessible universe, but there is a self-interested reason for building artificial general intelligence as soon as possible. If we build it and in a way that is controllable, and its creation occurs within our lifetimes, then we live forever. So, because everything is...
I get it now.
It's a speed run to immortality.
That's how we transfer our brain.
Right.
So maybe there are ways to upload our minds that don't involve AGI. That's possible as well. Maybe, there are different routes. Maybe we develop advanced nanotechnology and we inject some nanobots into our bloodstream. It crosses the blood-brain barrier and it scans the microstructure of our brain and transfers that via Wi-Fi basically to a computer. So that's one possibility. But also maybe we just create this artificial God, this superhumanly, quote unquote, intelligent system. And since everything is an engineering problem, according to these individuals, then we just delegated this task of curing the problem of aging. And then, maybe about 5 or 10 seconds after we say, could you cure aging? The super intelligent machine goes, okay, I figured out how. Here's how. I'll develop the therapies right away. So if we get AGI within our lifetime, this is what they think, then we get to live forever. So there's a huge reason to, yes, you want to be cautious and try to safeguard against the AGI causing an existential catastrophe. But also, you don't want to just put the brakes on indefinitely. I mean, there's a small group of doomers who want to do that, but most people in this field would reject that position because they want to live forever. And yeah, if you get AGI in the next decade, then you're good. Then you have literally trillions of years ahead of you to become a digital sentient being, tour the universe and so on.
It gets so wacky.
Yeah. How do folks who buy into these ideologies, how do they navigate or negotiate an intelligence that is that they're working towards, that is intelligent enough to do all these things that you've mentioned, but not so intelligent that it does makes some horrible mistake that and I don't even know if this is possible or even going to happen. Obviously, no one can look into the future, but makes some really horrible mistake that causes death and destruction to large amounts of people. Like when I think of an artificial intelligence that is capable of doing exactly what you stated, that just tells me that it's capable of all of these other things. And sure, some of them might be for the greater good of people. Some of them would be horrible for everyone. And how do they negotiate that reality?
Yeah, so they have their arguments, which are the main argument for why artificial superintelligence or ASI. So you've got AGI, which is just a broad class of anything that's human level or above, and then ASI, which is a smaller class within AGI, which is some system that is much more intelligent than us. By the way, we're talking about this as if we have a good definition, a good understanding of intelligence.
Right.
You know, the more I've studied the topic, the more confused I am about what intelligence means exactly. And so basically, you know, the argument comes down to this idea that the system is some kind of optimization procedure. And once you give it some final goal, like, you know, making people smile, then it's going to be completely focused, narrowly focused on achieving that goal. So then there's a question of unintended consequences. So in its pursuit of that particular goal, what if it does stuff that we don't anticipate that ends up being harmful? So, you know, like one way to make us smile would I mean, we just know this is true. You could implant electrodes in our facial muscles, and then, you know, you could force a smile. Okay, that's not what we want. So then we just add in this extra constraint, says, okay, make us smile, but not in that way. And then you could come up with another way that it's, you know, okay, so maybe it doesn't implant electrodes in our facial muscles, it puts them in our brain. Okay, not that either. And you could keep going through this over and over again and end up with a really long list of constraints that you'd have to add into the system, in addition to specifying the final goal of making us smile. And then, and the point of this exercise really is ultimately to show that maybe we've missed something. Because you could, you know, you could keep sitting back and reflecting on various ways that there could be unintended consequences that are really undesirable. And you keep coming up with new examples. And then finally you think the list is complete. And you go, well, how do we know it's complete then? Maybe we missed something else.
Sure.
And so ultimately, you know, from my perspective, so, you know, I think one of the big problems with this argument is not so much that there might be unintended consequences that as such we did not foresee, but it's this notion that the unintended consequences would kill everyone on Earth, you know, which is what a lot of them claim. And then, you know, when you look at their arguments for that, they're pretty sci-fi, pretty speculative. You know, Eliezer Yudkowsky, who is directly linked to every one of the letters in the TESCREAL acronym. You know, he talks about, well, maybe it could, you know, synthesize these diamondoid bacteria. So they'd be, you know, really robust, but they'd self-replicate in the atmosphere. They'd spread around the globe. They'd block out incoming solar radiation. And then, you know, global agriculture would collapse. And it's like, I don't know, maybe, but maybe not. I mean, diamondoid bacteria is it's his own coinage. He invented this. And it's like the best thing he could, you know, come up with. So there isn't really a good kill mechanism, as we would say. There isn't so all of that, you know, having said that, I do think that there are significant, potentially catastrophic dangers associated with certain advanced systems, which is why I would say don't build them. You know, and they would respond, that's not an option because we probably can't get utopia without these super intelligent systems. So it's a non-starter to claim that we shouldn't build them in the first place. So yeah, and I don't know, maybe it's useful at this point just to mention very briefly these two camps within the TESCREAL movement, which look at first glance like they occupy just radically different views about technology and the future of humanity and so on. But in fact, they are just different versions of TESCREALism. So you've got the doomers on the one hand, and you've got the accelerationists on the other hand. And basically they differ only with respect to their probability of an existential catastrophe happening if we build AGI in the near future. So doomers say it's very probable, accelerations say it's very improbable. But both of them subscribe to the exact same vision of the future. Re-engineer humanity, colonize space, colonize just every corner of space, harness all of the energy outputs of stars out there. So we build these mega structures that surround stars and just harvest that energy, and simulate virtual reality worlds in which there are trillions of people living. So they agree about all of that. They just think doomers are just going to say, we do want AGI. Again, that may be absolutely integral to creating this techno-utopian future in which we're all these post-humans that are digital in nature spreading throughout the universe. But we're just not ready to build AGI yet. And so that's why you've got people like Yudkowsky saying we need to place a ban on AGI, which is the function of that would be just to enable us to solve these other problems. How do we control the artificial superintelligence? How do we anticipate all the unintended consequences? And then once we solve that problem, it's pedal to the metal, create
Game
AGI
on.
as soon as possible. Game on. Yes. Because then we get to live forever. I bet people like Yudkowsky, I don't know this for sure, but my suspicion would be that, he would say, he has said in interviews that he grew up reading science fiction authors and computer scientists like Hans Moravec, who literally wants to just replace humanity with machines. Like, he has been explicit. He wants to help that along. Get rid of Homo sapiens. And, he calls them our mind children, just have this population of intelligent machines and they just take our place. So he's pro-human extinction in a very real sense. Totally, yeah. And so Yudkowsky grew up reading these people and he said in interviews that he believed as a kid that he would never die because when he's older, we'll have the technology to live forever. But, I think now that he has come full circle and believes that actually we need to put the brakes on these technologies. My guess is that he comforts himself by saying, okay, maybe I won't get AGI in my lifetime, but there is a backup plan, which is to sign up with companies like Alcor based in California to cryopreserve the body or just the head. So, their saying is, freeze your head to save your ass. and so I think some of these doomers are like, okay, it's not the end of the world for us. It's not the end of, even if we don't get AGI within our lifetime, we can always just, be cryogenized. And then once AGI can be built safely in the next 2 decades or 3 decades or whenever, then we'll be resurrected.
It strikes me that the tremendous ego involved is just unbelievable. But even listening to you, Émile, I also think that even if they can't save their bodies, they think that they're having this hugely profound impact on the future and that it's going to have a piece of them, right? And that's the tremendous ego that's here. And what's the reason I keep on wanting to talk about this, the reason I'm so glad you're here is because when people see an AI summit and Musk is there, or they see Sam Altman, or they listen to people from Oxford, for God's sakes, they don't understand the depth of the craziness that's motivating what they do, number one. Number two, because they're so good at PR, you and Timnit Gebru and Margaret Mitchell and Emily Bender and Sophia Noble and on and on and on don't get quoted in the press. I keep on coming back to stochastic parrots because it said enough with this nonsense future shock crap. You're going to build the technology, pay attention to the issues that are here now that are about labor and environment and fooling people about things, and credibility and the use of the human voice. So forget their prescriptions. I'm sorry, one more point real quickly. What's interesting too is that people often say, oh, we're going to build in the guardrails. But the point is you can never build in every guardrail, no more than you could with a printing press. I wrote a book called The Gutenberg Parenthesis. And so I'm drawing parallels between them. And the idea that you could come up with everything that anyone could possibly ask a machine to do that's bad, and you could stop it, is an impossibility, right? So it's a tool that's just going to be there. And we flawed human beings are going to use it sometimes to flawed ends on purpose or through unintended consequences. And we better recognize that and know that and deal with it. So with all the talk of the White House executive order about this stuff, and the new head of the UK effort in this I think is tied to TESCREAL, and so that movement is getting heard. What's your message to the makers? Forget the CEOs, the folks who are doing this at a workaday level. Workaday sounds a little odd, but the people who are actually building this stuff, the people who are going to use Lambda and other models. What are the ethical constraints or mission that you think that they should be following instead of all this crap?
Yeah, I would say a few things. One that comes to mind is that the real existential threat, I believe, is the TESCREAL worldview.
Yes.
And, again, that's, if it weren't for that, I don't believe that AGI would be the explicit aim of these companies that have billions of dollars. Profit is part of the equation, right? Obviously, Microsoft and Google and Amazon expect to make, enormous profits. But TESCREALism, this techno-utopian vision of digitizing ourselves, colonizing space, subjugating nature, maximizing value. And so it's basically just an extension of capitalism. I mean, it's capitalism on steroids in a, kind of same way that transhumanism is eugenics on steroids. So on the one hand, the whole reason that there's this push to build AGI in the first place is the TESCREAL worldview. Also, I think with respect to the accelerationists, the pursuit of this utopia poses all sorts of near-term catastrophic dangers. It's a lot of these individuals just have a kind of reckless view of technological progress. They don't take seriously the various risks. The Stochastic Parrots paper, that's all about risks.
Yeah.
It's like, it's in the media, you look at the way journalists are covering this, it's like the people in the TESCREAL movement are the first ones to say, oh, there are dangers associated with these large language models. No, the AI ethicist people have been screaming about that for years. And so on the one hand, the accelerationists, they ignore a lot of that, the environmental impact, the social justice aspects. It's like, I think from their view, the vast and glorious future, to quote Toby Ord, the future is so vast and glorious that, if people get trampled during this march of progress, then, that's just kind of the cost of progress. So that's a huge danger with accelerationists. And the doomers, on the other hand, they're like, okay, actually the dangers of AGI are much greater than accelerationists will acknowledge. And what hangs in the balance is not just 8 billion people. If AGI goes wrong, much, much, much more important from an ethical perspective is all the lost value, is the non-existence of all of these digital people. You mentioned 10 to the 48 is like one lower bound estimate. So it's all of these unborn digital people who could otherwise exist in the future. It's those unborn individuals remaining unborn. That is the much, much, much more significant loss associated with an existential catastrophe, with human extinction or something like that. And I mean, this is not me explicit. This is explicit in.
Oh yeah.
This is explicit in literature.
Basic question: is AGI BS?
Yes, I think so, because
I just want to get that kind of on the ground.
Yeah. So in a paper, in the paper I referenced earlier that I wrote with Timnit Gebru, which I think will be out this February, finally.
Good.
Her, I mean, she obviously is this brilliant computer scientist who has made all sorts of seminal contributions. And one of the important things that she added to the paper, was this idea that AGI is just an inherently ill-defined system. It's like we're just not, there's no even definition for it. If you look at what Nick Bostrom writes versus what OpenAI, OpenAI has a bunch of different definitions. Oh, maybe it's just a system that can perform at human level with respect to every economically valuable job. So that's one definition, but there are other definitions so nobody really knows what it is what this thing is that we're trying to build.
It's a MacGuffin.
Sorry?
It's a MacGuffin. Do you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's this thing we're all going to pursue, but we don't agree about what it is.
Yeah. So, yeah. And even beyond just the pursuit of utopia, which, again, this is one reason why I would say that TESCREALism is the real danger here. The accelerationist pursuit of utopia, that's going to trample a bunch of people. It's minimizing all of the current day harms. The doomer view, you've got people like Yudkowsky saying, we're so not ready for AGI yet that we should risk thermonuclear war to prevent AGI from being built in the near future. Again, he wants AGI, just not in the near future. And so he's literally writing in the pages of Time magazine. Now he has connections to people in the U.S. government that we should risk thermonuclear war. So that is another huge danger. But even if we managed to build an artificial superintelligence that was completely controllable by the individuals who are controlling it. Side note, who are they? Well, it's the rich and powerful.
Right.
Which sort of gets at my last point here is the realization of techno-utopia, I think, would be absolutely catastrophic for most of humanity, because the vision that they are pursuing is a deeply impoverished and highly problematic view of what the future ought to look like. I mean, one thing that's absolutely striking when you read the TESCREAL literature, which I have done because I was in this community, and I'm ranked the sixth, the individual who has published more papers than just about anybody in this field. So I'm ranked number 6 on that. I could have said that better. Sorry. So anyways, I know this literature. One thing that's absolutely striking about it is that there is virtually zero reference to what the future could and should look like from the perspective of feminism, indigeneity, so indigenous futures, Afrofuturism, disability, queerness, various non-Western thought traditions, Islam. Religion is growing around the world. There's a very real sense in which the future is religious. Christianity is increasing in terms of percentage. Same with Islam. The percentage of non-religious individuals is projected to decline from 16% to 13% by the middle of this century. So, point is, if you want to talk about the future of humanity, you just can't ignore the fact that there are billions of people in these other thought traditions. And so what's really striking about the TESCREAL literature is the lack of any kind of serious engagement in these alternative perspectives.
Because it's their religion and they're the gods in it.
Totally. It's just techno-capitalism on steroids, extrapolated and expanded into the accessible universe. And that is what the TESCREAL worldview is. It's deeply impoverished. And I think if they were to successfully realize that vision, it would be devastating. It would erase all sorts of diversity. I mean, is there any space in this digitized future where we're all living in, computer simulations for indigenous cultures? No, there isn't. So they will be erased, just as, it will just continue the catastrophe of Western colonialism that's happened over the past several centuries into the indefinite future.
Can I ask one more question, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where was your burning bush? Since you were part of this and you bought the punchline, what was the moment in which you saw a different light, scales off eyes, burning bush, pick your metaphor, to say, and to become what you are now, which is a leading expert out of your heresy in this? I find that conversion fascinating. How did that happen? And can it happen to others?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has. Mm-hmm. It's not uncommon for young people to end up in this community and then, once they're in the midst of it, to flee it, because it's very seductive from the outside. It's there are big numbers. We're talking about grand futures, timescales of trillions of years. The universe will remain habitable for 10 to the 40 years, maybe 10 to the 100 years. That's when the heat death is expected to happen. So that's just an enormous, if you want to be a big thinker, then, I don't know, think about the far future of humanity. We're talking about other galaxies, and it's all just very, profound. And so there is a certain appeal to it. I certainly found these big numbers and these grand futures very seductive. But once you get in it and you realize like how impoverished it is and how, basically everybody's like a eugenicist, and it's, this community is just way more welcoming to people on the far right than it is to people who care about social justice. That certainly was my experience. I could give many examples. Then people end up sort of fleeing it. For me, it really was discovering, and this is the most embarrassing epiphany to admit in public, but basically just discovering scholars who weren't like privileged white men. And I was just in this tradition, even in philosophy departments, it's a lot of dead white men. There is this Western canon, which is, just dead white men. So, anyways, just sort of like realizing, there actually are these visions of the future and that are not just capitalism extended. And there are ways of being in the world that reject the kind of atomized, the neoliberal kind of conception of the individual. And then so that was one of the revelations. And the other one was really reading the history of utopian movements that became violent and realizing that in many cases, there were two ingredients at the heart of these ideologies that enabled them to quote unquote justify in the minds of true believers, violent, even genocidal actions. One was a broadly utilitarian mode of moral reasoning. So the ends can at least sometimes justify the means. And the other was then, of course, this utopian vision. So the stakes are just, the future contains astronomical or near infinite or infinite amounts of value. And so then if you put those together, you say, okay, if the ends can sometimes justify the means, and the ends are just a literal paradise where we live forever and everybody's perfectly happy and, we've abolished suffering and so on, killing a few million people can seem like a pretty good deal in order to get that.
But you come off as a killjoy to the nth degree then, yes.
And so just realize, these two ingredients are right there at the heart of the TESCREAL.
Is that the basis of your book?
The most recent book?
Yeah.
No, the most recent book is kind of, so I am in the beginning stages of writing a book specifically on TESCREAlism.
Yay,
so
glad to hear that.
This will be foregrounded for sure. And the other one was just really like a history of thinking about human extinction from the ancient Greeks all the way to the present, and then thinking about the ethics of human extinction. And so long-termism, TESCREAlism, and so on, that advocates for a certain position within the field of the ethics of human extinction. But there's so much more to say. So there are all sorts of different views that you could embrace with respect to the goodness, badness, rightness, wrongness, and so on of human extinction. So I was sort of exploring that. And that's a topic that almost nobody's really written about.
Yeah.
So,
Jason, sorry.
No. Don't be sorry at all. I've been captivated this whole time. This has been really fascinating. So I'm really happy that you jumped in there because many times my mouth was just kind of wide open. And I feel like I have a much better understanding of TESCREAL and everything within there. And I'm super looking forward to you writing a book on this topic. I think you're right. There isn't a whole lot of literature out there on this, and you seem like the right person to write that. Émile Torres.
The other thing, if I may say real fast,
Absolutely.
Just that there are so many scandals and so many just jaw-dropping aspects of this worldview that, it's just every page of this book, there's going to be something that people go, that can't be true.
Right. It's going to seem like fiction.
Here.
Right. When I first started reading you, when I hit the first links of it, I said, no, come on. And you're very convincing, and you have the receipts, and the citations matter greatly. But again, it's people from Oxford, for Christ's sakes, are among the philosophical leaders of this craziness. It's really hard. And for me as a journalist, what I can't get my head around right now is how to get this in the heads of the journalists who are covering this, because they're too easily accepting this and making the celebrity of these folks. You know, Walter Isaacson, and I looked at the index at least of Isaacson's. I didn't find, the words long-termism or eugenics or TESCREAL was probably too new for him, any of that in his book. The fact that, again, these people are going to be in the White House and number 10 and Brussels. And this perspective, the perspective that you're bringing that is so jaw-dropping and so important, just is not getting the attention.
Yeah, I'm working on
fix
it.
That. Bit by bit, podcast by podcast, we got to fix that. So I'm very grateful that you took all this time to explain it, because I try to blather about it, but not very well, and I emphasize the importance of it thanks to you. So I'm just honored to be able to learn more from you and be in this conversation.
Indeed.
Thank you, Émile.
Yeah. 100%. Absolutely agree. We are super lucky to have you here for the last hour, Émile Torres. Of course, your current book, because people aren't going to be able to buy Émile's book that they have not written yet, but the current book is Human Extinction: A History of the Science and Ethics of Annihilation. And Émile, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this really important information and a topic that keeps coming up. So you're the right person to talk about it. Thank you.
The topic's not going away, unfortunately. Thanks so much for having me. This is really wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we really appreciate you. Thank you, Émile. I'm Jason Howell. What do you get your favorite geek who already has everything? Well, I know just the thing. It's a Club TWiT gift subscription, of course. TWiT podcasts keep them informed and entertained with the most relevant tech news and podcasts available. And with a Club TWiT subscription, they get even more. They get access to all of our podcasts ad-free, the members-only Discord, exclusive outtakes, behind the scenes and special content, and exclusive shows like Hands on Mac, Hands on Windows, and the Untitled Linux Show. You can purchase your geek's gift at twit.tv/clubtwit, and they're going to thank you every day for it.